to talk about something that happens to all of us. It happens very much when you are working towards fitness goals. It also happens when you are working towards other goals in life. It can also be events, it can be vacations, it can be weddings, it can be having a baby. But this evolutionary thing that kept us alive for the thousands of years is something that now in modern society that a lot of people struggle with, and we beat ourselves up and we think that we shouldn't be reacting the way that we are because we know better. So it is going to be a great conversation on dopamine. And dopamine is a neuromodulator slash a neurochemical. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of dopamine, but I want to really get into the science of it, talk about what dopamine does in your brain, what it does in your body, what happens when you have high levels of dopamine, what happens when you have low levels of dopamine. So I'm just going to give couple more minutes for people to come in, and then we will get started. Somewhere at the bottom here, if you guys have questions at any time, there is a chat and there is a Q&A. So you're welcome to put either in there and I will answer them before the end of the call. Yeah, so first thing that I want to show you, I'm gonna pull out my whiteboard for this one, is this is supposed to be a straight line, okay? So just assume it's straight. I know it's a little bit wiggly, but this is going to be your baseline of dopamine, okay? In a perfect world, this would be how we feel all the time, but that is not how dopamine works. It is never going to be a straight line. Like, yes, this is your baseline, but the big thing that I want you guys to understand is there is going to be peaks in dopamine where it goes above baseline. This is when we are feeling good in pursuit of something. So this isn't getting the thing, it is pursuing the thing, taking action to go get the thing. And then there is also dips in dopamine. And this is when we do not feel motivated. This is when we are struggling to do the thing that we know that we should be doing, but we just cannot get ourselves off the couch. We cannot drive ourselves to be motivated to go and do the thing. And it's going to look something like this, okay? So there will be times in your life where you are at baseline dopamine, but throughout your day, you are going to have peaks, and then those peaks follow up with dips. So, question for you guys, and I'm going to publish this poll if I can find it. There we go. Oh, wait, nope, not that one. This one, launch. Have you ever felt really sad after achieving a goal that you worked so hard for? So pop your votes in. Yes, no. Okay, so the majority of people are saying yes. We got a couple no's in there. That's totally fine. What is happening when we feel sad after achieving a goal? And the reason I wanted to do this talk today is because this is one day post 60-day challenge for a lot of our women that completed our last challenge. And even yesterday, on the day that they took their after photos and they saw their transformation, they're like, yes, I saw my transformation. This is amazing. I accomplished it. I feel good. But why do I feel so lost? Why do I feel so sad? Why do I feel unmotivated? Yesterday was super amazing. I was so excited to wake up and take the photos, and then it just all disappeared. And I had to break the news to them that that's going to stick around, not just today, it's probably going to be around for a couple of weeks. So why is that the case? And it is something called a dopamine deficit. So I'm going to go back to my drawing here. We have our baseline. When you are working towards something, I'm going to use the 60-day challenge as an example here. When you are pursuing it, this baseline dopamine is actually going to change, where now your baseline dopamine elevates. And as you get closer, this is supposed to be a straight line, just bear with me. As you get closer to the end of the 60-day challenge, Oh, we're up here. So your baseline dopamine is elevated because you are continuously working towards a goal. You are anticipating the end. You are anticipating the end result. When I get to the end of the 60-day challenge, I'm going to be so happy. My life is going to be so much better. And then you get there, and what happens? Your dopamine drops way below baseline. And because this was 60 days, going from here back to what your normal baseline was is going to take a couple of weeks. Weeks, not a couple days, a couple of weeks. So I want to just talk about a little bit what is going on with dopamine, help you understand in the brain why. Why does it go up and why does it drop afterwards, and what can I do about it? So dopamine is not the neurotransmitter for motivation, okay? It is derived from pursuing the thing. It's not actually achieving the thing, it's anticipation of getting that thing. And it's what propels us forwards. So it doesn't have to be a 60-day challenge. If you are working towards like a work promotion, or again, planning a vacation, planning a wedding, working towards a photo shoot, doing a competition prep, all of these things are going to increase your baseline levels of dopamine because every day you're waking up and you're working towards something, you're planning, the days are getting closer, you're making sure everything is arranged for that day. However, dopamine can also cause addictive-like behaviors. So we know, we've all heard like dopamine is pleasure, and this is why people are chasing it with drugs or sex or alcohol or gambling or food or sugar. However, addiction is just the narrowing of things that bring us pleasure. So something that would cause high senses of pleasure or reward for someone, the more that you do it, doesn't necessarily bring you that pleasure, and it is a narrowing of it. Okay, that also ties in with dopamine because dopamine is a neuromodulator. So neuromodulator and neurotransmitter, they can kind of be used interchangeably. However, some neurotransmitters are not neuromodulators. Essentially, what a neuromodulator means is it can change the activity of other neurons in our brain. So it can either increase the activity or decrease the activity of those neurons that control our body in many ways. Remember that we're just meat with electrical currents running through us. So whenever I'm stressed out, I'm like, you're just some meat with some electrical currents. Take a breath, it's fine. And it kind of helps bring me down a little bit because it's those electrical currents that are driving all of the things that we feel or that we want to feel or that we don't want to feel, but still happen. So when we have these nerve receptors, they're all over our body. They're not just in our brain, they're all over our body. There's actually some in your gut as well that tell the brain the level of nutrients inside of your digestive tract. And there's one in there particular, and it's a nerve cell that can detect three things. Can't tell you which of those three things it is, but it can detect three things. One of them, protein, amino acids. So it can detect amino acids in your gut and say, we got protein, we're good, we're feeling sufficient, we have enough nutrients. The second thing it can detect is essential fatty acids. So that is your EPA and your DHA, your like omega-3 fish oils, the ones that are found in salmon as well, things like that. So again, those receptors are like, I don't know, this is protein or it's an omega-3 fatty acid, but we got some nutrients, we're good. The third one it detects in your digestive tract is sugar. So when there is a dopamine deficit, your brain and your gut can connect and be like, hey, how is the nutrient status of our gut? And if you are not fueling yourself with enough protein or enough essential fatty acids, taking an omega-3, getting it through those food sources if you're able to, it can come up as a cue of we need sugar. So dopamine also has a very big role in your gut, which is why proper nutrition, but if you're a part of Lady the F Up, that won't be a problem. However, when you're in this dopamine deficit, this is where sugar cravings are going to present, but we will get into how to manage them. But the more aware you are of everything going on in your system, if you are in this dopamine deficit period for whatever reason, you work towards something, it happened, now it's over. When you're craving those sugary things, you're like, oh, this is just dopamine deficit. I can work through it. I need time. I know what tools, which we'll get to, I can utilize to help get me out of this state. Okay. There are 5 circuits in the brain that use dopamine, and I'm not going to go into the details of like this part is called this and the neurons. I'm just going to give you a high level overview. And then if you guys really want to go into it, you can ask me more questions or you can do your own research. There's a lot of good stuff out there. So the 5 circuits. The first one is in the back of the brain, and it is responsible for the initiation and the suppression of movement. So go do that thing or don't go do that thing. And this is also why exercise makes us feel good and increases our dopamine, because this back of the brain area of go do the thing, go move your body, moving your body increases dopamine. If you do not move your body, you can find a decrease in dopamine, which is why when you're in this deficit, even though you don't want to work out, you don't want to go for a walk, you don't want to do your cardio, do it. It will make you feel better and it will slowly bring that deficit closer to baseline over time. Other parts of the brain that use dopamine. Dopamine modulates all of our primitive functions. So part of it is actually regulating our core temperature. Dopamine helps regulate that. It regulates our hunger. It regulates our pursuit of relationships, especially when it comes to a life partner, our pursuit of sex. It is responsible for your prefrontal cortex regulation. So if you guys have listened to any of my mindset talks or the window of tolerance or stress, anything about that, you know that your prefrontal cortex is your logical brain. It is the one that says, we know what we should be doing, and this is how we're going to execute it. However, with your prefrontal cortex, that needs to be online for dopamine to be able to regulate the prefrontal cortex. So if you are in a very high stressed position, you are out of your window of tolerance. If you do not know what your window of tolerance is, follow up with me after. I'll be happy to educate you. But essentially, you're in your, I can manage this stress bubble. This is when the dopamine system can properly function. You can refill that dopamine. But if you are highly stressed, you're not sleeping, there's things going on in your life that you are freaking out about, and you're out of your window, the dopamine system is going to go a little haywire. And that's another reason that you can get those sugar cravings. Yeah, so the prefrontal cortex is planning and executing. Another thing that's really important with the prefrontal cortex is that it understands the context of situations that you're in or environments that you're in. So it can recognize who's around you, where you are, check back with your memories of past experiences to be able to compare that and say, okay, where are we compared to our past experiences and what information do we already have about this situation? Okay. It is responsible for either saying, shh, no, 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 or not now. So it's that brain region that really just regulates, I know what I'm supposed to do. Another thing is dopamine has a really big role on the pituitary gland regulation. So like hormone regulation, ovary functions, cortisol, thyroid, not even going to touch that much out of my scope of practice when we get into that. And then the final one in the brain and the 5 circuits is actually how our eyes adjust to certain light conditions. So if I were to turn all of my table lamps off and it was dark and your eyes adjust to be able to see, that is actually part of the dopamine system. So just a general overview of what it does and how important dopamine is. And when it's down here, why you have such a hard time. So we have that baseline dopamine. I want you to kind of think of it like a wave pool. That's a really good example of it. So if I have my, can you guys sort of see my water here? So if I have my water, it's kind of sloshing around. Okay. So think of this in a much larger scale of we have a wave pool and the waves come out and they have the peaks and then they have the dips, and some of the peaks are higher than the other ones. But if too many waves come too quickly, there's going to be water that sloshes out all over. And that is actually, bear with me as I wipe this off. That is actually going to be a lowering of this baseline. So when the water sloshes out, if this is your baseline day to day, but you have too many peaks of, oh my God, this is really exciting, or oh my God, I had something that tastes really amazing, and you have a peak and then a dip and then a peak and then a dip, over time, your baseline is going to be down here compared to up here. A+ art student, I know. So what we need to do is actually manage how much dopamine is being released in terms of the peaks and the dips and what we can do about that based on our actions. So we don't necessarily want to stack dopamine things, and I'll get into what that means. So in this wave pool, we have like the water that sloshes out if the peaks are too high. How do we refill that? So our dopamine over time, I'm not going to dump this out because I have nowhere to dump, but let's say our baseline dopamine, it's sloshed, it's now down here. How do we refill that over time? That comes with actions that you do, not just while your dopamine is low, not just for a couple days. These need to be ongoing daily habits and daily practices, minimum like 5 days a week. I understand life happens. There's going to be a little bit of inconsistency here and there, but things like getting enough sleep. So quality sleep, that is when your brain is refilling the dopamine overnight. And if you are supposed to get 8 hours in bed and you only get 5 hours in bed, you're missing 3 hours of that dopamine replenishment. And then you multiply that by a week, and then you multiply that by a month, your dopamine reservoir overall and your baseline dopamine can decrease compared to someone else's. The next thing that can be really beneficial is going outside for morning light in your eyes. Remember that dopamine controls the eyes and how they adjust to darkness and lightness, and that is connected to a part in the brain that messages to other parts in the brain. So when you go outside as early as you can, as long as the sun is up, and spend, if it's a sunny day, 5 to 10 minutes, if it's a cloudy day, 10 to 30 minutes outside, as close to the sun coming up and as close to you waking up as possible, anywhere between that 5 and 30-minute mark every single day, you are going to help your dopamine just stay topped up. So we have sufficient sleep, morning time outside. The next one is that exercise and movement. So I talked about that. The back of the brain is responsible for telling our body to move. When we are moving, it releases more dopamine, and that general baseline can also increase. So sleep, sunlight, movement, and it doesn't have to be like super strenuous movement either. Walks are okay, but we also want to get our heart rate up. So cardio, resistance training, they are going to be really good things, but you're part of Lady the F Up, so you're doing it anyways. Even when you're in that dopamine deficit and you're like, I really don't want to do this, see it as the thing that's going to make you feel better. Short-term discomfort for long-term growth and long-term gain. Oh, is there a question? No, I think we're good. Okay. Where was I here? We have our baseline. Oh, so just some random stats here. If I'm going to give you random numbers, you don't really have to know what these mean, but they put electrodes on people's brains and then they measured the dopamine. So if you just have your baseline dopamine, for most people, that measures out at like a 3 to 4 reading. Okay. Don't have to know what it's measuring, but baseline dopamine, about a 3 to 4. If you are hungry and you're thinking about, what am I going to make for dinner? Or, I have my pre-planned meal. It's Tupperware. It's in the fridge. I'm thinking about it. I'm going to go heat it up. What that does is it brings your 3 to 4, doubles it up to a 6 to 8 if you are hungry before eating it. So that is going to double it from 3 to 4 up to 6 to 8. And then if you are eating the meal, and let's say this is something brand new that you're trying and you're like, oh, I'm so excited to try this new recipe. My husband made it for me, or I bought from this meal prep company. This is the first time. And then you consume it and it tastes really, really good. That might actually take your dopamine from 3 to 4 and like triple or quadruple it up to anywhere between 9 to 12 to 16, somewhere up there. However, if you try that food and you're like, meh, or let's say you're thinking about it and it's your like chicken, rice, and green beans. It's a meal that you always have, even when you're hungry. It's going to double to 6 or 8. And then you're like, yeah, okay, it was my chicken and green beans and rice. It was good enough. I don't mind eating it. I don't hate it, but it's not the best thing in the world. Your dopamine will return back to normal. However, if you try something that's brand new, or let's say it's a meal that you make all the time and all of a sudden the chicken is bad and you take a bite and you're, it's awful. your dopamine is going to drop below baseline because of a phenomenon called dopamine reward prediction error. Dopamine reward prediction error. This is a very large concept for a lot of people that happens in their day-to-day. So think about it as like, oh, we're going on a trip, or like, yeah, I'm going home, my flight got delayed. And you're like, dopamine reward prediction error. The thing that I was working towards, that I was looking forward to, my flight leaves at 8 o'clock. Now it's at 11. The outcome that I was anticipating is not happening the way that it was going to. Dopamine drops. The food does not taste as good as I thought it would. The dopamine drops below baseline. So now you're stuck underneath your baseline again. Example of this for me personally is pizza. Like once a year, in my head pops up, oh, pizza. We like pizza, because it goes back to all of the nostalgia growing up. We had Friday night pizza nights. The first like 2 years my partner and I were together, we would have pizza all the time. So my brain associates pizza with dopamine because it was an enjoyable experience. But every time that I say yes, because I'm like, nope, I'm going to try the pizza. It's been a year. Let's see. And I take a bite, I'm always disappointed. Always. So that is dopamine reward prediction error. And what I have noticed in the past, and before I understood dopamine reward prediction error, if I had a bite of pizza and I was like, oh, it's not that good, I still found myself eating 2, 3, 4, 5 more slices. Why? Because that dip in dopamine is going to trigger you to go out and seek more dopamine to bring it back up to the baseline. So I am now chasing quantity to make up for lack of quality, and it's not going to work. So now when I'm disappointed by something and I want more of it, and I'm sure this is a phenomenon that's happened to quite a few of you, you can understand, oh, this is dopamine reward prediction error. I am in a dopamine dip. I'm in a dopamine deficit right now, and time will bring it back up. Having more of that food will not. As much as my brain is trying to convince me, go have more bites of that, it is not going to bring it back up. Yeah, on the flip side, if I know a lot of you guys have, or not all, some of you, let's hope that some of you have seen my stories the past couple of days where I've been like, my brain and the food noise just keeps thinking about donuts. I know why I'm in a dopamine deficit right now, and that is because I was working towards something, I accomplished a project, and now I'm in a dopamine deficit. And my brain will always go to food. The dopamine deficit right now, not that bad, because it wasn't like a 60-day challenge or a competition prep where it was months of looking forward to something. It was like 2 weeks of me doing a project, and I was like, yeah, I got it done. So anticipation, project done, great. Now I'm in this dopamine deficit, and the food noise pops into my head. It's like, donuts, go get donuts, go get donuts. And this is where I have to manage my environment, because if we go back to, the dopamine system remembers context about things. It remembers if you're in this environment, we're more likely to go get that thing. So for me, one of the things that I really noticed, it was like coming on and off over a couple of days, and I was like, I'm listening, it will pass. I'm going to go make my bowl of chicken and rice and green peas and just eat, and I'll be fine. And that did help it pass. But there was one that I noticed where I went to the gym in the evening and I had a killer workout. I hit a personal best in my cardio because I'm training for the CN Tower stairs. I was like, fuck yeah. And then I hit a whole bunch of personal bests in my lifts as well. So I was like, fuck yeah. And hitting the personal best, pursuing that, like being on the stairs, being like, fuck, I'm gonna hit my best time. That pursuit until I hit the time, that is your dopamine increasing. Exercising alone increases your dopamine. Exercising and hitting personal bests spikes your dopamine really high. And then as soon as the workout was over, I went into the change room, I grabbed my gym bag, I walked out the door, donuts, go get donuts on the way home. And I was like, what the fuck? But it makes sense because peak dopamine, piled on with more dopamine, piled on with more dopamine, all of the stuff that I was working towards was over. Dopamine dipped below baseline. And it was, how can we go get more dopamine? And it knew when you drive home, when you take your normal route, you drive past your favorite donut store. So instead of me putting myself into that environment of, yes, I'm going to drive past it, because your brain recognizes, oh, if you pass this streetlight and then you turn right, It's right there. We are in pursuit of it. That is going to bring your dopamine back up. Remember, it's the pursuit. So if I had chosen to take that route home and turn right, like not even go into the donut shop, but take the route, turn right, dopamine would have gone up, even if I hadn't gotten the donut. And then if I did go, turn right, park in the parking lot, go into the store, dopamine's going up. Placing the order, dopamine's going up. Paying for the order, peak dopamine. Bite the donut, it'll either go back to baseline if in my head it's the same level of deliciousness that I remember, or it will drop below baseline because it's not as good as I've mentally hyped it up to be. And 9 out of 10 times with foods that you hype up in your head, that is the case. It's not as good as you think it's going to be. And you're like, and then you chase quantity to make up for quality. Does anyone have any questions so far? Is this making sense? I hope. Let me throw up the second poll. How do I republish this? Allow panelists to vote. I hope you guys can see that. Maybe launched. Still learning how to do this. Okay, I will just ask it. So for those of you who said you worked really hard and then you felt sad, in the days or the weeks after, did you struggle with lack of motivation or intense cravings or both? You can either type it into the chat, you can put it in the Q&A, you can just answer in your head. But is this resonating with your own personal experiences where you think back and you're like, yeah, after that, I didn't want to do anything. I wanted to eat all the food. Does it make sense? I hope so. Oh, we got some questions. Lack of motivation. How do you fix constantly wanting the donuts? I've been having a problem with food. I know it shouldn't be doing it, but I can't get it out of my head. I'll get there. But no, this particular context, reflect back, Kristen, upon what were you working towards or what has happened in the past that caused that peak in dopamine? Was it accomplishing a task that you have been putting off? Like there's a lot of things that can cause that peak and then the dip below baseline in dopamine. And when you have that level of awareness with yourself, and there's a lot of women that I work with that I've worked with for a couple of years now. One of them, she goes to a work conference every October, and it's like one of her biggest career-based things. And when she goes, we now understand when she comes back, she's going to be sad. She's not going to want to work out, and she's more compassionate with herself. When we get frustrated and when we start to beat ourselves up about I should know better, why does this keep fucking coming back? I'm so pissed off. That is going to actually take your prefrontal cortex offline. And that is going to mean it cannot regulate no, we don't want that. It's just a craving. It'll pass. That part of your brain will literally check out, and your emotional brain and your reflexes will start to run the show if you bully yourself about it. Okay. Self-criticism without self-compassion is self-bullying. So if you are not compassionate and you don't have that level of awareness, you can be stuck in this cycle for a long time. So bringing awareness to it and then applying the tools that I will get to, I promise, to help shift your body out of such a dopamine dip or dopamine deficit. That combination is something that you will practice and you will get better at with time. For those that finish a 60-day challenge or a competition prep and we talk about the reverse diet, we can, as coaches, can say the reverse diet is going to be the absolute hardest thing that you have ever done, and it's going to mentally fuck with your brain, but you won't get it until you experience it. And looking at the attendees on here, I know that there's at least 4 people right now that are like, I experienced it the past 6 months and it was fucking awful, but I'm now on the other side. But when you go through it, especially the first time, you can be like, whoa. And when you realize that you're not the only person, that every human being, physiologically, from an evolutionary standpoint, is designed this way. Because if you think about it, when we were hunters and gatherers, the dopamine driving us is how we stayed alive. It was okay, I'm going to get my hunting gear. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to find the animal. Oh, I tried, but I missed. Dopamine deficit, reward prediction error. On to the next thing, the pursuit of it. That's what kept us alive. Now we're living in the 21st century, I think so. And we don't have those evolutionary needs anymore, but the circuits are still hardwired in us. But the more that you experience things like reverse diets or post-event deficits, the better you are going to get at noticing them. And then the better you're going to get at implementing the tools to be able to overcome and get yourself out of the deficit quicker. I have been in the competition dieting, reverse diet thing for 9 years now. I have had 7 reverse diets. 0 of my 7 reverse diets have been perfect. 0 of them have not had me turn to food. However, the first reverse diet that I did, I gained 30 pounds in a month. The last reverse diet I did, I gained 5 pounds, which was what we were supposed to gain in the reverse diet process. So even though you mess up a couple of times, that communication with your coach, we are very important in the reverse diet process. Communication with your coach, being able to name it, and then utilizing these tools is going to be something that you get better at with practice each time that you do it. But you need to be in the experience to get better at it. And this is where the mini dopamine deficits in life, they are going to happen to you. If you post on social media and all of a sudden one of your posts gets way more likes, way more views, way more comments than you normally do, boom, that is a peak in dopamine. As soon as that hype is over, that dopamine is going to crash below baseline. And that is where you can practice these tips and tools. If you do really well in a work project and you get a big round of applause, boom, peak dopamine, dopamine crash. How do you navigate afterwards? So in life, there are always going to be little peaks and little dips of dopamine. You're never going to just constantly be at baseline. Throughout a day, you're going to have peaks and dips as well, but they're not going to be these really big changes as if you're working towards a goal that's a couple of months of investment and preparation to get to that goal. So with that, just be compassionate with yourself. Reverse diets are going to be challenging. Communicate with your coach and utilize some of the tools that we are going to go into. I have so many notes here. I've kind of jumped all over the place. Too stressed, already talked about that. Okay, so dopamine deficit. The higher that the peak in dopamine is, and the faster that it rises, the greater the crash is going to be after. Okay, so with something like a 60-day challenge, it's not a very fast peak. You got 60 days of slowly going up, going up, going up, going up, going up, and then your baseline is lower, and it's a slow rise back to baseline afterwards. But let's say you love resistance training, okay? So you are not someone that's like, fuck, I hate going to the gym. You're like, you love resistance training. You're like me. So we go into the gym, we hit that personal best on the stairs, we hit that personal best on a whole bunch of exercises. You're listening to loud music. Music also increases dopamine. So you're listening to your favorite jams while you're working out, and then you drive home and you get the donut. It is a combination. It is a storm of peak dopamine because all of that occurred within like 2 hours. The next day, that is a steep drop to come underneath, and it's going to take some time to recover from. So this is another thing that you can notice in your day-to-day. If you are feeling low, if you're feeling unmotivated, look at the past 24 to 48 hours and say, what did I do that could have potentially driven my dopamine up? One of the things that people don't know about is pre-workout powders. So I never, ever, ever use pre-workouts because my dopamine is already regulated enough as it is. With pre-workout powders, there's a lot of ingredients that they add that are supplements to increase your dopamine. And if you are having pre-workout and then loud music and then the really good workout, it's again this storm of peak dopamine. So if you ever feel tired or unmotivated after your workout, try doing a workout listening to a podcast instead of your favorite music, or try doing a workout without taking the pre-workout. I highly recommend that you're not taking pre-workout on a regular basis anyways. And then if you combine that with caffeine, so people who either love caffeine pills or coffee, dopamine itself doesn't necessarily increase with the intake of caffeine, but caffeine increases the dopamine receptors in your brain. So it's willing to take more in, and there's more surface area for all of these messages to be delivered because you have increased caffeine. So if you have pre-workout that has caffeine in it, or pre-workout and caffeine and loud music and training, it's like that can tip you over the edge. And a lot of times when we're in the grind, when we are doing tons of cardio, people rely on the pre-workouts, people rely on the loud music, they're pumped up, they're in this dopamine surplus working towards a goal. So you have to be careful, because even though your baseline dopamine is now up here, you can still get, bear with me. Let me draw this. So dopamine is increasing. This is over like a couple of months' time. You're still going to get things that look like this. Okay, so you're going to have above your new baseline, below your new baseline, above your new baseline, below, above, and then it can dip real low. So there's going to be cycles within it. It's not a linear graph. It is very much wavy the entire time. So we want to mitigate how high these peaks go above whatever the baseline is. Why is this so hard to erase? So the difference of peak goes up really, really quickly, peak crashes and goes pretty damn low, and then it takes a while, and then you have this like slower raise, which would go into a slower dip. But the farther down this line goes, the worse you feel, the less motivated you are. Very likely the higher your sugar cravings will be. Where am I here? Yes. Oh, and then when you're in that dip, do not engage in the behaviors that brought you the peaks, because those peaks, you're just going to rebound up and then rebound further down. Let me draw this again. So we have something that causes a peak, and then it dips, and then it dips. So this is the narrowing of pleasure, how I was talking about with like addiction. So essentially, this peak would be from the same stimulus. Okay, so let's say it's like eating a donut. Okay, so this is one donut. The peak is good, and they're like, it's not as good as I thought, and then it dips. And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna have another donut, and then it peaks, but it doesn't peak as high as it did before, and now it dips even lower. And you're like, I feel like garbage. Let me eat another donut. And then they barely gets above baseline, and then you dip even lower. So you don't want to use the actions that gave you the peak now that you're in the deficit to get back up to baseline, because that's just going to create less of a peak and more of a dip afterwards. So actually getting into the what can we do? The first one, and I know this is something that we don't want to hear, is literally just wait. Wait it out. Dopamine will replenish itself over time. So if you literally say, do nothing, eventually you're going to feel motivated enough again. But that could be a couple days, that could be a couple weeks. And if you guys are like me, we have a lot of shit to do where we can't have time to just be like, I'm just not going to do stuff. So you're going to need to shift your system in some way. So this is where sleep, we talked about sleep. Sleep's super important. If you are not getting your 7 to 8 hours in bed, that is your number one priority. The second one is the time outside, 5 to 30 minutes in the morning, sunlight into your eyes. If you can walk at the same time, combine movement and sunlight, even better, because movement increases the amount of dopamine in our brain, and it's not going to give you that peak. It's going to raise your baseline. It is going to fill up your cup that was empty beforehand. So those ones. And the tools so for those of you that are struggling with the food noises, the dopamine deficit, the post-goal lows, these are the tools that I want you to either write down or remember in your head. Sleep, sunlight, movement. Those are foundational for anyone at any time for dopamine. The next one is cold water immersion. This does not have to be a cold plunge. This could be a cold shower. So for any of you who just finished the 60-day challenge, what I highly recommend that you do starting tomorrow morning is you wake up in the morning and the first thing that you do is you turn on your shower to the coldest water setting possible. You set a timer for anywhere between 30 seconds and 2 minutes. You can start with 30 seconds, but you want to work your way up to 2 minutes. And you stand in that. You can like just put your hair up, rinse from the neck down, but you stand in that cold water that sucks and it feels painful while you're in it. Not like, oh my God, I'm going to die pain, but you're like, this is uncomfortable. I really don't like this. Like internally, you're like, get me out of here. That pain and that discomfort is going to increase your dopamine. And it can double your baseline dopamine. It's not going to give you a peak. It's going to double your baseline dopamine for the next couple of hours. So it's not going to be a peak and then a drop. It's this like really nice, slow curve that is happening instead. So morning wake up, cold showers. I do not recommend frequent submerging of the neck cold ice baths if your goal is to build muscle. When we try to build muscle and we go into cold plunges, ice baths, etc., on a frequent basis, that can blunt your hypertrophy muscle growth response because it decreases inflammation. And inflammation is actually what we want to make our muscles grow. But the cold showers do not have the same effect. Because it is like kind of running all over the body, it's not as much of a shock to the system. The liver doesn't respond the same way. So that's what's happening when the inflammation decreases. Our liver releases something called spike proteins. And that's like, release all of the resources that we have. We think we're going to die. We need to save what we can, sort of thing. And that's why we recover quickly. Cold showers don't have that same impact. So wake up in the morning, first thing you do, cold water, timer for 60 seconds, stand under there. You don't have to get your hair wet. It is going to suck. But if you lean into the suck and say, this is going to help increase my dopamine. This is going to help me feel better. This is going to help me feel more motivated and driven for the rest of the day. It doesn't suck as bad, and you will slowly adapt to it. This is something, cold showers, I will practice, I'm gonna say at least 4 times a week. My typical morning routine, because I am someone who finds if I do not regulate my dopamine, if I don't get enough sleep, if I engage in a lot of peaky dopamine behaviors that create crashes afterwards, I feel ridiculously unmotivated. I have all the sugar cravings. Sometimes I give in to them. So I need to do the sleep, the sunlight, and the movement on a regular basis, but I also implement the cold rinses in the morning. So I will wake up in the morning. I'll take my dogs into the backyard. I will spend time outside. I will get some sunlight into my eyes. And then I will come in. I will have my cold shower, rinse off, and I will start my day. So that's the time outside and the cold shower at the same time. The next tool that you guys can use is something that many of you have heard me talk about before, non-sleep deep rest. So non-sleep deep rest puts your brain into a sleep-like state that helps replenish your dopamine. And they've done a couple of studies of like how much can non-sleep deep rest replenish your dopamine. They tested it, and this, I understand this is unrealistic. If you listen to a 60-minute, so a 1-hour non-sleep deep rest audio script, it can replenish your dopamine by up to 65%. So picture this cup being fully or almost fully empty. And then in this 1 hour of non-sleep deep rest, it would bring it up to about here-ish, just through that activity. However, I recognize I don't do 1 hour of non-sleep deep rest. You guys probably don't have the hour, but I'm going to challenge you that you can probably find 10 to 20 minutes in your day to do it. And I will share my screen and show you guys my favorite non-sleep deep rest videos. These are just my personal favorite. You can go to YouTube. You can check out any of them. Okay, so you type non-sleep deep rest into the search. My 2 favorites, you're also going to see that Yoga Nidra pops up. So Yoga Nidra is just another name for non-sleep deep rest. They're a lot more like calm, and it's a woman's voice that's walking you through things. So I like to listen to those to fall asleep at night if I'm having trouble sleeping. But if you are looking to do a quick one, this one, Andrew Huberman, he is I listened to a lot of things, and a lot of the dopamine education that I learned, he introduced me to. And then I was like, this is so fascinating. And I went down a rabbit hole. So this is a 10-minute non-sleep deep rest. So if you type in NSDR Huberman, I'm sure that will be the first one that pops up. And again, it's just 10 minutes. My other two favorites are this one. I don't know how to describe it, but it's Dr. Wayne Coates. This one has breathing recorded into it. So it just like has breaths that you can hear in the background. And then my third favorite one is this one. So non-sleep deep rest by Made For. But literally you can pick any of these videos and they will all have a similar effect on your dopamine. So even though it's not going to be a 1 hour, 65% replenishment, 10 minutes of that is still going to replenish your dopamine to some extent. Okay, so we got sleep, sunlight, movement, cold exposure, non-sleep deep rest. The next thing is the precursor to dopamine. And what I mean by that is the ingredients you need to consume for your body to make it is an amino acid called L-tyrosine. So tyrosine is one of the 21 amino acids. So when protein gets broken down, it gets broken down into amino acids. One of those is tyrosine. And tyrosine is going to be, let me just pull up my chart here. One of the things that will help your body make the dopamine that it needs to. If you do not have sufficient tyrosine coming into your body, you won't be able to make enough of the dopamine that you are consuming. So let me share my screen again. Where are we? And if you guys don't have to write this down, you can literally just Google it because that is what I did in preparation. High tyrosine foods. Number 1, beef. Beef has lots of tyrosine. Number 2, pork chops. Number 3, salmon. Number 4, chicken. Number 5, tofu. Number 6, milk. 7, ricotta cheese. 8, white beans. 9, squash and pumpkin seeds. And 10, wild rice. So in a day, I have wild rice, I have squash, sometimes squash, but I do have pumpkin seeds. Don't like white beans, cannot do cheese. Chicken breast, lots of the time. Fish, not a fan. Pork, pretty regularly. Beef. So what you can take away from that is higher protein foods have more tyrosine because tyrosine is an amino acid, and amino acid is a broken down form of protein. So why do we at LadyTheFUp preach high protein? Yes, to build muscle, but also to make sure that your body has enough ingredients coming in to make dopamine because you are exercising and we hopefully are getting enough sleep in the evening. So tyrosine is your friend. You can potentially, and this is if you are in that like dopamine deficit, you know that a low is coming because you were working towards something. You're like, the thing is almost there. When you get into that dopamine deficit state, you can potentially introduce a supplemental L-tyrosine. So you can buy a supplement, just comes in a bottle like any other supplement, anywhere between 250 milligrams and like 500 milligrams. But keep in mind it's a supplement. So it will raise your baseline, but it could also cause a peak and then a little bit of a trough after, and then a peak, and then a little bit of a trough as the baseline is increasing. So it is going to be very individualized where you need to pay attention to if you are introducing the L-tyrosine, how do I feel? Do I feel a crash in the day after? Is my dosage too high? Should I pull it back? So that is all individualized. Do your own research on it. It's not something that I would personally recommend. It's not something I have ever done because again, if you increase back to baseline and you're taking tyrosine, you're going to get those little peaks and then your baseline can be adjusted. So if you're really struggling, it is a possibility, but not something I would recommend every single day. Now, let's say you are in this dopamine deficit. You're feeling sad, you're feeling unmotivated, or you just had like the best, oh my God, I'm looking forward to something. And then there was a crash afterwards. And now you're in that, like, I feel sad and I either want food or I don't want to do anything at all, but I need to get myself into a state of doing the things because life goes on and we have adult responsibilities. doing something that feels more painful than the thing you have to do. So let's say you're someone who you're like, I gotta go to the gym and I don't want to go to the gym. And I have like I have no motivation to do it. I want to sit here, I want to eat all the food, and I don't want to go to the gym or I don't want to get my workout done. What is something that is going to feel more painful than going to the gym? Now, this is going to be different from person to person. So it could be hopping in a cold shower. When you're like, ugh, I don't want to go do the thing, go do something more painful or more uncomfortable, such as a cold shower. For me, stretching. Oh, I despise stretching. And I will force myself to stretch because if I'm in a dip and I'm doing something painful or uncomfortable, it's going to bring you out of that dip a little bit. It's going to bring you closer to baseline. But because you were not looking forward to doing the thing, it's not going to give you a peak anymore. It's going to bring you up, but it's not going to bring you too high. It's going to bring you to like closer to the baseline or at your dopamine baseline so that you can then continue on to do the thing. Other things that people find really like, ugh, I don't want to do this, cardio, actually doing exercise, like telling yourself if it's not the exercise that you don't want to do, and if let's say you have like a work project, you're like, okay, go work out for like 5 minutes. You're like, I fucking hate working out. I don't want to work out. Go do it for 5 minutes. You can then go do your work project easier because it's more uncomfortable than doing that. One that's a little unconventional, but it can resonate with some people. It used to resonate with me. If you are someone who despises meditating, listening to it, laying down, being present, focusing. If you're like, nah, meditation's not my thing, that can actually be a tool that you can implement for 5-10 minutes to get you to do the thing that you actually have to do that is a priority. So you got like cold showers, stretching, exercise. If you don't like exercise, meditation, journaling. Someone once upon a time said cleaning to me. And this is one where like, you have to assess how much you hate cleaning. Are you like, ugh, it's cleaning, but I do it. And like when the outcome happens, when the house is clean, I feel good. If that is the case, then no, that's not something that is actually going to help. I like to call it procrastinating because you're procrastinating the thing that you have to do by cleaning, which makes you feel kind of productive, but it's giving you a increase and a peak in dopamine. And when you're done cleaning and your environment is clean, you're like, yes. What happens to dopamine? Goes back below baseline because you had a reward associated with it and your brain remembers the context of when we clean in the past, we feel good after. So if you are in this rut, you are sucked into the couch, you want the donut, whatever it is, do something more painful than what you have to do, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes. And then you should have the drive to go do the thing. And it's not going to feel as painful as when you were in the bottom of the deficit. Now you're closer to baseline. You're like, okay, I can go pursue the things again. Going back to the 60-day challenge, I want to give one example of something that happened with me and one of the women that I worked with throughout the challenge. So it was about 5 weeks into it. And she came to me and we had a call and she was absolutely miserable. Now, we were lifestyle before. So when she was going to the gym and when she was working out, when she was tracking her progress, overall, she enjoyed the activities. She liked her workouts. But 5 weeks into the challenge, she was like, I fucking hate this. I hate myself. I hate the process. I hate going to the gym. Why? Because she was attaching the reward of doing the challenge to the things that already brought her joy. So if you are someone who actually likes going to the gym, if you attach that action, or like, let's just say this process in general, if you're someone who likes working out, you don't mind tracking your food, you like the progress that you see, if you now take that progress and process and say, I'm going to take this process to work towards a goal, you are going to stop liking that process as much because as the rewards come, your dopamine system learns, compares back to where it was, and you're not going to get the same hits of dopamine. So what we ended up doing was saying, okay, 5 weeks into the challenge, we're not going to do the challenge anymore. I'm going to switch you back to lifestyle. And within a couple of days, she felt so much better. Her sense of self-worth was night and day because we no longer had that reward tied to the process. So if you are someone who genuinely likes working out and you're like, this is cool, this is part of my lifestyle, you do have to be very aware if you are someone who is dopamine sensitive, let's say, to these peaks and deficits. Is something like a 60-day challenge or an intense photo shoot prep or a competition prep, is that something that is worth investing in to potentially not like the process as much and to have this reward prediction error? Because that's what it is. So many people will commit to a goal or an event. It doesn't have to be Lady the F Up based. It can be, I'm going to go back to school to take something. And when I get the degree, I'm going to be happier. It's the when I get somewhere, I'm going to be happier when I get there. If you follow that process, you're going to make your life more miserable than it needs to be because of the dopamine reward prediction error. You think when I get to destination, I'm going to be happier. We all know it's not how it works. It is in the process that you find that happiness, that you find that gratitude. So when you attach it to, I get here, and then you get there and you're like, oh, my life actually hasn't really changed that much. And I'm not happier. I'm still the same person. Dopamine reward prediction error, boom, you are going to go lower than if you hadn't anticipated a greater outcome than you expected. So it's not necessarily the physical results part of it. It's not the, oh my God, I'm going to get shredded. But if you associate, I'm going to have abs and I'm going to be happy, when you get those abs, you're not going to be happy because you are attaching a reward with the process. And then once you get those abs, you're not going to like the process. I hope that makes sense. Okay. We're coming up on an hour, so I do want to open it up to anyone that has questions about dopamine, anyone that might want to share or type out any sort of struggles, anything that resonated with you. Yeah. So think about it. What if you are stuck in a deficit and you have lack of motivation? What tools can you try to implement to help bring yourself out? Sleep, sunlight, movement, daily foundations, something you should do every day, ideally at least 5 days a week if you cannot get all seven, but that is your foundation to feeling good. And then the tools when you're like, I'm in a deficit, I recognize I'm in a deficit, is just wait. Give yourself time, ride the wave of this sucks right now. It's only temporary. It's not going to suck forever. I will make it through this. I need to focus on my 3 foundations. So wait it out. Non-sleep deep rest, 10, 20 minutes. It's really all you need. They're on YouTube. If you want the links that I screen shared to save them, you can message me. I can pop you or I can share those links with you. Cold water exposure. Ideally showers rather than being submerged because we want to get strong and build muscle. But 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Do not do this too close to bed because it will keep you awake and alert, but do it right when you wake up in the morning. Sunlight in the morning, cold immersion in the morning, and exercise in the morning is one of the best things that you can do to set yourself up for a more motivated and productive day. Um, Last call for questions. If you are watching the replay and you have questions, you know where to find me. Feel free to follow up. And I am happy to provide any resources. But I hope this resonated. I hope it allows you to be able to connect what's going on in your brain and what's going on in your body and not be so frustrated about it. The more that you are aware of these dopamine peaks and dips and deficits, and the more that you practice utilizing those tools, the better you will get at navigating them. Speaking from personal experience, if you are watching this and you are going into your first reverse diet or you are struggling with that post-goal low, know that it is so normal the first time to be like, what the fuck? Because you, like, again, we can talk as much as we want about this topic, but until you experience it, it's not really truly going to sink in. But we're all human. It is all literally hardwired into us. You are not going crazy. It is not something that you want to run and hide and be like, I'm not going to check in with my coach because I'm not being on plan, because we get it. and we are here for support, and we are here for tips and to check in with you. We need to make sure that prefrontal cortex stays online so the dopamine regulation can happen. If your prefrontal cortex is checked out, then we cannot help, and oftentimes you will not reach out for help either. So if you haven't watched the video on the window of tolerance, find that in Mighty or ask me to find it for you. Yeah, thank you for tuning in, ladies. Have a wonderful evening, and we will be in touch soon for the next event. Bye.